Hello everyone and welcome to Beachside Bites. I'm here today at Olde Line Lanes in Lincoln City and I'm with one of the co-owners, Danelle Lockery. Danelle, this place is really unique.
Yeah, my husband and I moved our restaurant into the old bowling lanes in Lincoln City. He does most of the cooking. That's Ethan back there.
Hey Ethan.
And I do most of the baking.
I love baking. What's something that you love to bake?
I really like to make buttermilk biscuits.
Would you come back to the Culinary Center with me and we'll bake up a batch of biscuits?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome, let's go. All right, Danelle, welcome to the Culinary Center, and I see you brought Ethan with you.
I did.
All right, you promised me biscuits.
I've got them.
Hey, let's just jump right in.
All right, sure. So what you want to do first is combine all of your dry ingredients. So I've got my flour and sugar in the bowl already. I'm going to add my salt and my baking soda and my baking powder. And then I'm going to whisk them all together. So after you get your flour mixture all incorporated, you want to add your butter. It's important whenever you're making biscuits to make sure that the butter stays as cold as possible and that whenever you mix it, you get it into nice little pockets, so this way they're nice and flaky. So you want to make sure that your butter is ice cold and that it's cut up into little cubes, and that's going to help us mix everything in. And today we're using Tillamook butter. It's made about 40 miles north of here.
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
First rule of biscuits is keep your butter cold. The second rule is to not work it too much. So as soon as that turns into what people say is like a sandy texture, you're going to want to stop that and then move on to the next step. And it's really nice, you know, in this case, less is more. So if you leave a couple chunks in there, it's not going to be a big deal in the end result.
Now, what is the purpose of this, though? Why don't you want to just completely break down the butter? Why leave little chunks in there?
So whenever you bake your biscuits, the moisture in the butter starts to evaporate, and that creates little pockets of flaky flour, and so then you get the nice flakes and the layers that are in biscuits. A lot of times if a biscuit turns out a little bit too tough, it was because maybe they didn't have everything as cold as possible.
All right, you're
How's that look?
there.
Looking good.
She's getting there.
All right, so next up we're going to add in buttermilk. I really like to use buttermilk whenever I'm baking because I think it adds a nice flavor to anything. It adds a little bit of sour to something. Ethan, will you dump that in for me?
Absolutely.
I'm like, yeah, Ethan's going to be your sous chef.
Now this is where it starts to get a little bit messy.
Yeah. And what you want whenever you're making biscuits, a lot of times whenever you're making cookies, is you don't want gluten development. And gluten develops whenever you add moisture to flour and start working it. And that's going to add stretch and pull and chewiness to bread. But in the case of biscuits, we want tender, flaky biscuits. So we're only going to mix this long enough so that the flour and the buttermilk and the butter make a solid lump. We can even leave a lot of that to go because as we shape them into the biscuits, they'll incorporate a little bit more.
All right, you ready?
Sure, go ahead and dump it on out.
It's going to get messy in here.
Totally worth it.
So you can see it's still pretty shaggy. It's a very technical term.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
There you go.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this out and just use my hands. I'm not kneading the dough, I'm just squeezing it together. And then I'm gonna use, this is called a bench knife or a bench scraper. And I'm gonna use it to make the layers. And we just keep squeezing that together. And I just cut it in half. And that'll make my square of dough.
I also secretly taught him how to make biscuits so I wouldn't have to do this messy part.
Ah, you're a smart woman.
Yeah.
What we do at the restaurant is we cut them into squares. And the reason I cut them into squares is because you don't want to work the dough too much. If I cut it into circles, there's all that leftover dough between the circles, and you have to push that back together and work your dough more. But in this case, we just cut it into squares, and there's nothing left over.
Now we're going to brush the biscuits with a little bit of egg wash before we put them in the oven. You can also use a little bit of cream or a little bit of butter. It just helps the biscuits get nice and brown.
So another thing you can see is that those are the layers that are going to be baked into our dough, and that's why it's going to be all flaky.
That is amazing. I really respect that. You know, I mean, you make the ketchup and the bread and the pickles and that you make everything. And I just, you know, there's a lot of places that don't do that because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it's something that's near to our heart, and we love whenever people come into the restaurant and ask us about the food or ask us questions about how to make it. We love sharing recipes. There's no secrets, because cooking from scratch or cooking homemade food, it really isn't that hard as long as you have a little bit of know-how and the tools.
Yeah, okay, you make it look easy. I don't know if everybody else would feel that way. But we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get these in the oven, and then through the magic of the Culinary Center, we've taken those square biscuits and we've turned them into round. Because I cut them into rounds.
And you can take a look at these, and you can see that's the baked product, and even though you cut them into a different shape, they still have those flakes.
All right, Ethan, Danelle, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Donna.
Oh my God, it was my pleasure. And thank you to all of you. I really appreciate it, and we will see you all again on the next Beachside Bites.